of all, our education system doesn't produce financial literacy. It produces financial illiteracy. Secondly, we have monetary policy that is being dictated by the flow, the use of, the handling of fiat currency, which has destroyed every single entity who has ever used it, and yet no one wants to address it. On top of using fiat currency, on top of sidestepping, I need to raise taxes to raise revenue, because all I have to do really is call the Federal Reserve and have them print more. I don't need you anymore. I just put in an order. We call it what? Quantitative easing, right? If we take that and put those things together, why? I guess my question would be, with groups like yourself, there's probably thousands in our country that are addressing financial topics. Is there a potential, based on what you may be hearing and seeing amongst those groups, whomever you're in conjunction with at the time, in addressing the root of the problem? And the root of the problem is, we can't just keep printing paper that's worthless, and then all of us sitting here, or whatever we do in our daily activities that are trying to address a financial concern, when it's actually your fiat currency is being lent to you on interest to begin with. I mean, before it even gets in your pocket, we owe just for having it issued. So we're already in debt there. Now, if you go and we talk about all of our Department of Education, OSHA, we could get into tons and tons of expenditures, right?
Dave, are you done with your question?
So I mean, I guess, you know, what I would do is take sort of a generalized step back and say, what is this going to do in terms of, this goes, I think, to my question about the sustainability. That do we want to be ultimately contributing to an increase in overall spending, which is going, right now, all of that is play money. I mean, I would go beyond fiat currency and say, at this point, it's all money that we're having to borrow from China in order to pay our current obligations. And there's this sort of belief that somehow there's this, you know, once again, the Obama administration recently, said it overtly, we don't have a spending problem. Well, you know, I think it's time for the nation to begin its 12-step program. The first step is, of course, acknowledging you have a problem.
So is your answer no, the potential is not there, that they will be able to cumulatively come together and address that very issue, that you got to deal with real money first of all?
Oh no, I think this is a serious concern. Part of the problem though is the big, you know, right now the question with regard to the debt issue is more federal, upfront is more federal than it is state, and you're asking state policymakers who aren't responsible for that to actually sort of take that on. And I know a number of them actually are concerned about that. They are concerned about the fact that they're contributing to the federal problem if they sign on to this. But you know, it's the old economic principle that, generally speaking, if you want someone to calculate a cost, you need to internalize it rather than have it external. And right now, basically, it's an external cost. It's a cost that the other system is taking care of, the federal system. And it may end up being a problem. In fact, it most likely, almost certainly will be a problem for the state system. But the legislature, I have spoken with a number of legislators who are very concerned about adding to the federal problem, adding to the federal debt and the sustainability of this in the long term. So I don't think that it's I don't think it's a lost cause. I think it's something that once again you should be chatting with these folks about those sorts of concerns.
What can we do? Can we storm our government, our Ohio government with letters opposing this? Is there something would that be effective?
I think, you know, look, the legislators, you know, are always interested in hearing what it is their constituents are saying, and they track these things. They track the correspondence they get, they track the emails they get, they track the phone calls they get, and they tally them. You know, and I was in an office the other day, and they were talking about what the numbers were on the phone calls they were getting. So absolutely, if you do that, you know, again, and because the problem is if folks on the other side are definitely calling it, you've got an awful lot of organizations that have lined up in favor of this. Some of them, traditionally are even probably friendlier to our side, like the Chamber of Commerce has come out and supported this. So they, you've got other nonprofit organizations like Ohio Right to Life that has come out in favor of this. So you've got the potential that folks could, who traditionally are more on the liberty side of the aisle are going to be contacting them and saying this is a good idea. They need to hear, if you oppose it, they need to hear from you because they will be tracking that.
How much of your background in heritage organizations, policy matters, do you look at the use of language that gets into the general vernacular around the country? Easter season, my daughter came home one day last year on Easter, one of her professional pamphlets going back to the rewriting of history. And Texas is a major place because Texas being so large, those textbook changes control a lot of what we get across the country. But the language in one of my daughter's second grade professional magazines that comes for teachers said encourage teachers at Easter, going with the religious divisions, to use spring spheres with the students. The kids said, "You mean Easter eggs?" Easter eggs have the connotation of religion. Spring spheres, and worse yet, and I think Rand Paul did a beautiful job the other day in one issue articulating the issue of civil liberties. And it shook things up. The low information voter, above, one notch above the lowest, could probably relate to that. One issue, I teach in my classes, I taught at Tri-State for 4 years in communication. I wrote my master's thesis on Ronald Reagan, as president making a speech for Barry Goldwater in '64. But the point is that I teach, it goes well here, but not in Westland. In our Brunswick University Center, I talk to students about for good. There's such a travesty of justice and civil rights and civil liberties by the language saying it was a workplace incident. Those soldiers and those injured and those families that are living, they are cut off from benefits, better benefits from their military presence, because the Justice Department and the Great Air folder calls it a workplace violence, a workplace incident. And if we could just, it seems to me, you're not going to get a staunch center, left of center types, but something like that touches both the lack of the emotion. You manage your sources to bring that out and fight that. You can bring people aboard and get them to think, in my view. It's just unconscionable that can go on, and those families are suffering, are fighting their battles. Can we have a national campaign for good or bust, change the law, change it.
Well, so to begin with, the idea that they're spring spheres offends my sense of geometry. We all know that they're ellipsoids. But no, you make an excellent point. It's something that we always need to keep in mind, which is the importance of rhetoric and the importance of words and the power that words have. And we see this time and again, and it's why as we're talking about things, we need to choose our words carefully and in a calculated fashion, so that we're having the maximum impact. But obviously, yes, unfortunately we've seen things like a forklift where you see the sacrifices of individuals made denigrated by this, when the administration clearly understands it's a terrorist attack. They actually use that as among the justifications for hunting down Anwar al-Awlaki, who was one of the masterminds who'd actually been coordinating with the shooter in that attack. They justified the battlefield action on the fact that this had been a coordinated act of terrorist violence. And yet then we're not going to acknowledge it as a terrorist incident, both in terms of, I think the rhetorical effect it would have on the public writ large, but also in terms of the benefits determinations. So, no, I think we need to be careful about the rhetoric we use, but we also need to hold other people into account for the rhetoric they use when it distorts reality, when it distorts our values.
I think we're about out of time.
All right.
But Robert, I appreciate your joining us today. Okay, I think a key point was brought up close to the end of that about what do we do. You're probably aware of some Tea Party organizations that are always out there telling us to march in the streets and scream and shout at our elected officials and shake our fist about how we're going to boot them out of office. There's another way of doing it. It's easier to catch flies with honey than it is with vinegar, right? And we got a lot of good elected officials. They need our support. When John Boehner wants to be, or should I say John McCain wants to be more conciliatory with the White House, we need to get in touch with Renacy and Gibbs and Jordan and let them know that we support them in taking a hard line and standing up for what's right. They can tell Boehner, they can tell McCain, our voters say no. We're representing our voters. They're the ones that elect us. Same thing with Batchelder, Hall, and Obhoff. They need to hear from us that we've got their back. And if they take a line against what somebody else wants to do, as long as we have, they have our support, they're okay. And they can stand up to Casey, Obama, or whoever they need to say, or stand up to and say, my voters support me on this. End of subject. End of debate, right there. So make sure that you get in touch with State Rep Batchelder, Dennis Hall, with them if you like, and Senator Obhoff. Is Senator still here, Lisa?
No,
He
he
just
had to
left.
go.
Okay, he had to go. He's taking those books down to Capitol Post. That is really cool. I talk about people that are thoughtful and do nice things for other people. How many state senators will come over here and carry a bunch of books down to the Capitol for us without an opportunity to jump out in front of the camera or anything else like that? So that's my kind of state senator. That's right.
What about a letter from Nevada County Friends and Neighbors that we all sign and get more signatures and just send it down?
That sounds like a little bit of an administrative effort, but if we want to take a position in opposition to the Medicaid expansion, we could have that vote.
Jim, I've heard quite often that, and not from any of ours directly, but I've heard quite often that from people who work in offices, the senators and representatives, that actually a long petition has no more value to them than an individual. So it's actually, they say it's much more worthwhile for you to send it in individually than to send in a long petition. That's what I've been told, so take it for what it's worth, you know.
You can. You already has that, you just ask them, please have me send it to you.
Okay. Draft a letter to Batchelder, Hall, and Obhoff. Oh,
It used to be.
okay, we can do that. Would be good. Okay, Scott? Oh. What does Rush Limbaugh call that? A obscene commercial break?
Profit market break.
Obscene profit center, right. Yeah, we do make good use of that. You know, some people don't like robocalls. I don't like robocalls. They intrude on my serenity. But they did help us out with the young Republicans the other night, getting the word out and getting some people there. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. It cost us a little over $50. We'll probably do that again. But that's just some of the and trivial expenses we go through from time to time. So your help is appreciated. Any other announcements before we close? No? Okay, 2 weeks from today, we'll be hearing from Kelly Coles of the Ohio School Board Leadership Council, and then we hope to see you here. Bring some friends.